Today's headline is Chaille-Long the Explorer, an American officer who fought under the Egyptian flag. The subheadline says, his mission to the King of Uganda, his discovery of the Third Nile Basin in Lake Ibrahim. Afterwards, he became a lawyer in New York, but returned to Egypt and was sent by the United States government to represent it at Alexandria. It says, the life of Colonel Chaille-Long, the African explorer, is probably one of the best illustrations of the familiar aphorism that truth is stranger than fiction. Charles Chaille-Long was born in 1842 in Princess Anne, Maryland, where his great-grandfather, Pierre Chaille, settled in 1710, a fugitive from the persecution which had culminated in France by the revocation of the Edict of Nantes. Educated at Washington Academy, Chaille-Long entered the State Guard in 1860, and when 22 years of age, was promoted captain in the 11th Maryland Infantry, United States Volunteers. Mustered out of service at the close of the war, he was honorably discharged with his regiment on June 15, 1865, and 4 years afterwards entered the Egyptian army with the rank of colonel of the general staff. In 1870, he was professor of the French military school in Cairo. In 1871 to 1872, Chief of Staff of the 1st Division of Infantry at Alexandria, and in 1872 to 1873, Chief of Staff of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Sections of the General Staff in Cairo. In 1874, he was designated as Chief of Staff to General Charles George Gordon, then Lieutenant Colonel Royal Engineers of the British Army, who had been appointed by Ismail Pasha, Viceroy of Egypt, the Governor General of the Egyptian Sudan, with headquarters at Gondokoro on the Nile. Henceforth, the career of Chaille-Long is one uninterrupted chapter of dramatic adventure. Accompanied by 2 soldiers, he was sent under the most adverse circumstances upon a diplomatic mission to Mutesa, King of Uganda, where after the most thrilling scenes, among which was the decapitation in his honor of 30 of the king's subjects, he succeeded on the 19th of July, 1874, in inducing the king to execute the treaty by which the authority of Egypt is acknowledged over the entire Nile Basin to the equator. Returning, he navigated the unknown Nile and discovered a Third Nile Basin in Lake Ibrahim, which was baptized by the Khedive Ismail in honor of his father. At Matuli, he was attacked by the army of Kiba Riga, was severely wounded, and finally, after much suffering and privation, returned to render an account of his mission. In a subsequent expedition, he led a column of conquest into the Niam country, where he was attacked by a warlike people, the Yambari, and compelled to give them battle. He annihilated the tribe, burned their numerous villages, and witnessed the extraordinary spectacle of an anthropophagic feast. As a result of this last expedition, he added a rich and populous country to the Khedivial crown, and besides, increased the domain of science by bringing back with him several specimens of the human race, and among these an adult pygmy woman, the first specimen ever submitted to ethnographical societies for scientific study. The Egyptian government, in recognition of the foregoing services, decorated him with the Cross of Commander of the Medici, promoted him to the rank of colonel in the regular army, and cited him in General Orders No. 18 of the War Department for gallant and meritorious conduct. In the following years, 1875 to 1876, he was sent to the East Coast in charge of an expedition which floated the Egyptian flag from Cape Guardafui to Keys Maya at the equator and along the Juba River. Great Britain looked upon the Egyptian expedition with disfavor and protested that England must protect the territory of the Sultan of Zanzibar, and Ismail was therefore obliged to recall the expedition, which in fact had been inspired by General Gordon and was commanded by his chief of staff. The Protectorate of Zanzibar, which Great Britain assumed later on, and the very recent bombardment may at this moment point the moral of British declarations. While in possession of the East Coast and established in command of 1,200 men of all arms and garrisoned on the Juba River, the camp was visited by the Prince of the Comoros Islands, who, placing at his feet the crown jewels and a coffer of gold, implored him to accept the crown of the sultanry of those beautiful isles of the sea. The American-Egyptian commander refused the crown, but sent Prince Abdullah's jewels and coffer of gold to the Khedive Ismail. The dramatic incidents of this episode have been narrated elsewhere, and from a thrilling romance in the real life of this officer. Monsieur Charles Manoir, Secretary General of the Society of Geography of Paris, in a letter addressed to the Minister of Foreign Affairs in France, says of Chaille-Long's expeditions, if the geographical results obtained by him have not had such an echo as other contemporary expeditions, they nevertheless occupy a most important place in the discoveries which have finally resulted in the solution of the problems of the discovery of the Nile sources. Obliged to quit the island by reason of protracted jungle fevers contracted in Central Africa, he returned to America in 1877, studied law at Columbia Law School, New York, graduated 1880, and was admitted to practice in state courts and Supreme Court of the United States. Returning to Egypt, he was admitted to practice in the international courts of that country in January 1882. On the 11th of June, 1882, by reason of the massacre of the Christians in Alexandria, the United States consular officers, affrighted, fled from their posts, and the government at Washington requested Chaille-Long to assume direction. Before and after the bombardment, the United States consulate received and protected refugees of all nationalities, and the consul placed them on the 4 American men of war in port. He was the last to quit his post before the bombardment, and the first to re-enter the burning city on the dawn of the 13th of July, followed by 160 sailors, marines, and officers placed at his disposition by Rear Admiral Nicholson, commanding the United States naval force in the Mediterranean, the British refusing to land or make any effort to save the city. The United States troops saved many lives, much valuable property, extinguished the conflagration, and preserved the city from total destruction. All of the consulates being totally destroyed by fire, except the American consulate, it became the refuge of all nationalities, and notably so for the French, who flocked to the United States consulate in great numbers. The Khedive Tewfik, his harem and court, were surrounded by the insurgents at the Palace Mustafa, but the landing of the United States consul created a panic, under the impression that the British were debarking in force, and in the stampede which followed, Tewfik Pasha and his harem escaped. But for this incident, the Khedive and the government would have fallen into the hands of Arabi, whom the British proposed to recognize as the de facto government. The dynasty of Mehemet Ali, never sympathetic to Great Britain, would have thus ceased with Tewfik. The Khedive, in recognition of this service, conferred upon Chaille-Long the cross of commander of the Medjid, offering him the privilege of re-entering the Egyptian army, with rank of brigadier general, thus re-establishing him in all the rights and privileges which had been nominally abandoned in 1877. Chaille-Long, however, declined the honor, preferring to sacrifice his personal interests rather than desert the government whose flag had already been dishonored by the officials who had fled from their duty at the first moment of danger. The United States government, strange to relate, had subsequently permitted these same officials to return to their posts and paid them during the interval of their absence, while the acting consul, whose services have been briefly recited, received from the Department of State a letter of thanks and approval. When public opinion in 1885, both in America and Egypt, brought the name of Chaille-Long to the attention of the President of the United States for appointment to the vacant post of diplomatic agent and consul general to Egypt, Lord Sackville-West, the British minister at Washington, opposed the appointment, alleging that Chaille-Long's sympathies were with the French and not with the English, and that his appointment would prejudice the great benefits which the British occupation had bestowed upon unhappy Egypt. Lord Sackville had not yet been detected in his undue interference with the affairs of the United States government. The President subsequently appointed Chaille-Long as Secretary of Legation and Consul General to Seoul, Korea. In the interval of the 2 years of his official residence in that country, he accomplished a perilous expedition to the island of Jeju, situated in the Great Ocean south of Korea. Jeju was terra incognita and had never been visited by a white man except by Hendrik Hamel, a shipwrecked sailor from Holland in 1653. The inhabitants treated the Dutchmen with excessive cruelty, and the tradition thereof had given the islanders a very bad name as pirates, about whom the most dreadful stories were told, both in Korea and Japan. Chaille-Long, notwithstanding these apparent insuperable obstacles, visited the island and penetrated to the capital city. He discovered undisputable traces of the occupation of Jeju by the great Mongol conqueror Genghis Khan, who in the 13th century made the island a basis for the Asiatic hordes which overran Korea and poured into Europe. An account of the expedition to and from the island is recited in a book which Chaille-Long has recently published in France. This work, which was printed in the annals of the Musée Guimet, the famous French institution devoted to the study of the religions of the world, is one of the most important contributions ever made to the history of this interesting country. Korea is the subject selected for the lecture to be given shortly by Colonel Chaille-Long before the University Archaeological Association, and the valuable Korean collections in the University Museum will be used in its illustration. This story came from the great state of Pennsylvania, being reported in the Philadelphia Times of December 6, 1896. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.